Hi, everyone. Moish is going to blow the shofar for us. Okay, before we begin.
Ready?
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, I hope everybody got a chance to hear that. I'm going to try to, there we go. Okay, so welcome everyone to Rebbe Nachman's Radiant Torah. And we are going to be reviewing and discussing the incredible parsha, Parshat Ki Teitzei. And I want to thank Dr. Eleanor Gudis for sponsoring this shir week after week. And may it be a source of merit and bracha for her and her family. Okay, we're going to begin this particular parsha, excuse me. This particular parsha is really an intense parsha. It contains 74 mitzvot, 74 commandments, more than any other of the Torah portions. And what's interesting about the way the commandments are given in this parsha is that, excuse me, one follows upon the other. There is a logical action and consequence throughout the parsha. What do I mean? I mean that when you read the first laws and you find that those laws might not be followed, the second laws pertain to actions that or events that would occur as a result of not being careful and scrupulous with the first laws. So we're going to begin with the beginning of the parsha, Ki Teitzei la milchama al oivecha. If you should go out to war against your enemies, and Hashem puts the enemies into your hands, you have captives, and you capture these enemies, what happens? So the Mishnah actually tells us that when the Torah is speaking about these enemies, it's not just speaking about enemies in war, which it is, but at a deeper level, it's also speaking about your real enemies. What are your real enemies? The real enemies we have is enemies, plural, is in one form, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the pull that takes us away from Hashem. This is our true enemy. And any external enemy is a material representation of a spiritual reality. Okay, material representation of a spiritual reality. Whatever we're going through spiritually always is represented in the material world. It's always given over to the material world to show us what's going on. So for example, we're speaking about enemies and we're speaking about war. And we're seeing what's going on. And I hope you don't mind me briefly touching on current events, but I do think that it's actually quite relevant. We see what's going on with Afghanistan and the takeover of the Taliban. 20 years of semi-stability washed away momentarily. And we see that this has led to China sending warships to Taiwan. Okay, because there's a snowball effect. Okay, when we don't contain, fend off, and even conquer our enemies, we're going to, instead of just dealing with those enemies, we're going to be dealing with more enemies. Okay. And so we see what's going on in the world, and we need to pay attention to it from a Torah perspective, because the Torah tells us and the tzaddikim tell us everything we see going on in the world is a message to us to return to Hashem, which is why we see a lot of crazy happenings in Elul and the beginning of Tishrei, the 10 days of Teshuvah. Okay. And so we have clues. Now, we may not, okay, it's true, we may not always be able to piece together the clues, and we shouldn't indulge in magical thinking and say this is a secret message for me and da 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 da. But what we can do is understand that whatever is going on in the world in the broadest sense is a message to each of us to return to Hashem. Always come back to Hashem. Build your relationship with Hashem. Find your safety and your security in Hashem. Because when we see the constructs of society crumbling around us, which many of us see, then what we want to understand is that this is a message to us. We can only rely on Hashem. Excuse me. So this idea is the Mishnah says our enemy is, our real enemies that we're supposed to capture is the Yetzer Hara. Rebbe Nachman has a few very interesting commentaries on this. The first is that when it says, when you're going out to war and you capture your enemies, it reminds us that very frequently in the Talmud and in the Torah, but specifically the Talmud, that when it says when you're going out actually refers to going out to do business. Going out is like a shorthand for I'm going out, which means you're going to the office, you're going to the market, you're going to trade and buy and sell. Okay, so this idea is, the idea is that going out is shorthand for going to do business. And Rebbe Nachman tells us when a person goes out to do business and they conduct their business faithfully and honestly, okay, and the person doesn't try to get one over, they're honest, they follow the halachas, of which there are many and specific when it refers to business, when a person's honest and above board, okay, and they know that they're going into business. Why? It says that when we go out to business, when we earn money, we should keep in mind that we're earning the money and we're going to take and give the correct percentage to tzedakah, and we're also going to make a kiddush Hashem. Okay, we're going to sanctify Hashem's name by being above board and honest. That is what a Jew must do in business. Okay, and people are weak. Money is alluring. Money and power are alluring. And this can be a very big Yetzer Hara. And it's so interesting because if you look around the world and you see all the corruption and all the cheating and scandals going on, nobody's shocked by it. But for some reason, when a Jew who's in the minority of this, because obviously most Jews who follow the Torah and believe in Hashem and trust in Hashem are going to follow the laws. Not all the time, but we're going to try. Okay. So, but when you see a Jew not being honest and above board, that's when the world goes crazy. See those Jews, look at those Jews. And every Jew feels ashamed. Why? You don't see in England, I lived in England for 4 years. See so much corruption and greed and just, it's incredible. And when one Englishman cons another Englishman, you don't hear, you don't hear the shame, the British, I'm so ashamed that we're British. No, but from Jews, you hear this because we have an innate sense that we're all connected, which is what? Whether you're picking up the Yated Ne'eman or the New York Times, doesn't matter what your paper is, and you see a Jewish name, you want to be proud of it. Every single person wants to be proud of it. So this is because of our inherent and innate understanding that we have to be better. We have to be more honest. I'm not saying even more honest than other people. Everybody should be honest. What I'm saying is better than our desires, better than what's pulling us. And, you know, this is a very human and universal struggle. We are blessed in that we have the Torah telling us what's right and what's wrong. Okay, we're very blessed in this. Okay, excuse me. So by conducting business faithfully, we're lifting out the sparks, the nitzotzot of Kedusha, holiness, from the realm of the Yetzer Hara, from the realm of the Sitra Achra, from the realm of evil. And by doing business faithfully, we lift it out. So how can we do business faithfully? I'm not going to belabor this point because I want to get to the other pieces of the parsha. Excuse me. I apologize. I want to get to the other pieces of the parsha. But the way we do this, the only way you can do business faithfully is if you have the underlying trust in Hashem. Because everybody's morals and ethics can be swayed at a certain point in time. And if you don't believe that Hashem has your back, so to speak, and you're going to trust in him, and it may work out, but it might not in the way that you want, but you're still trusting in Hashem, then it becomes not only possible to do everything faithfully and honestly, it becomes easy. It becomes second nature. There's no question. I don't have to lie. I don't have to exaggerate. I don't have to manipulate. I don't have to finagle. I could just be straight because Hashem is taking care of me. Okay. And that is the key to following anything faithfully, morally, and honestly. It's very easy to be corrupted when you don't trust in the higher power. It just is. And this is, by the way, this is something that's so fundamental. I am going to move on to the next topic, but it's worth when you make your hitbodedut, as I do, is talking to Hashem, help me trust in you. Let me get stronger in my trust in you, Hashem. Every day, I want to get stronger in my trust. And the more and more and more we trust in Hashem, the less what's going on bothers us and drags us down. Okay. All right. Now, the next factor in this is also very interesting. And this is related to this particular topic of when you go to war against your enemies. And Rebbe Nachman explains that when you go to war, and by the way, if anybody's interested, this is Likutei Moharan Tinyana, that's the second volume of Likutei Moharan, lesson 82. When you go out to war, which means when things oppose you, when things aren't going your way, when whatever you planned isn't working out. Well, for most of us, much of the time, what we plan doesn't work out. So the Rebbe says that's what when you go out to war means. And Hashem delivers these captives into your hands. It means that Hashem will deliver into your hands in an orderly manner as long as you take some of them captive. What does that mean? You draw this relationship that I was speaking about, the trust relationship with Hashem. You draw this into yourself. And then when you acknowledge that everything is from Hashem, even the things that oppose you, even the things that you're doing battle with, they're actually from Hashem. Okay? And you say, you know what? This is what Hashem is sending me. Then Hashem is going to eliminate the things that oppose your will, and your life will go forward smoothly. Okay? So if you want a little more order in your life, nullify yourself to this concept of Hashem is in charge, and we won't have as much opposition. It doesn't mean you won't have opposition, because opposition is often a gift and it often helps us grow. But it means that in general, when it's not needed for these other purposes, you won't have it. Okay. All right. Now, the next And perhaps actually one of the most intriguing parts of this parsha, which follows on when you go to war and you take some of your enemies captives, is referring specifically to the laws of captive women. Now, what we have to understand is that Jewish soldiers are still soldiers, and that even though they were tzaddikim back then, men see a beautiful woman and they capture her, and this is frankly universal. We see another lesson what's going on. The biggest fear for the people in Afghanistan now is that the Taliban, and they've already begun this, have begun to capture young girls to sell them into the most awful kinds of slavery. So the Torah gives men a prescription. It says that the underlying assumption is don't capture a beautiful woman and take her home and marry her. Don't do it. But if you're the kind of person that can't resist this, because everybody's at a different level, then here are the laws that you must follow. And I want to read you them as the parsha enumerates them. So the laws are like this, okay? Excuse me, I got the wrong page. So the laws are like this. The first thing is if a man can't resist, this is it. He wants his captive woman to be his wife, okay? Then the Torah permits marrying this woman only after the following conditions are met, okay? First and foremost, the whole idea is she must undergo a month of purification, okay? And she must mourn, because this is a woman who was captured in war. And the Jewish soldier is required to allow her to mourn her family. She may have lost her parents. She may have lost something in war. We don't know what she lost, but she's a captive, and a Jewish soldier is not allowed to afflict her. The Torah is very specific in this language. So, but the man must allow her to do this mourning in this specific measure. First, she has to shave her hair off, okay? Which, by the way, wasn't an affliction, because women in the non-Jewish world used to shave off their hair as a sign of mourning. So this wasn't necessarily affliction. This was her practice already, okay, among the Canaanites and so on. So, but she must shave her hair. He's not allowed to prevent her shaving her hair. And if she doesn't do it, he has to do it. Why? Because her hair is very beautiful. And we know at the Kabbalah level that hair contains sparks of purity and impurity depending on the status of the woman. So to purify the woman, she must shave her head. Next, she is required to let her nails grow so long that they look ugly. So this is a very interesting thing. It depends on your community, but most communities that adhere to Torah, women keep their nails short for a variety of reasons, often to do with Taharas HaMishpacha, okay, the laws of family purity. But long nails are not considered attractive, okay? So I know the trend is to have painted nails and long nails and nails with designs on them and all this stuff. And it used to be like a class barrier to that. Now there's no class barrier. Now all kinds of women do that. This is considered unattractive, okay, especially if they're very long. Next, she must put on mourning clothes for 30 days. She is not allowed to wear clothes of mourning. Why must she have these external expressions of mourning? Because after 30 days, a woman in this kind of garb and not taking care of herself with her shaved head that's growing out and so on is going to be less attractive. Now, we have to understand that the Torah is saying that there are certain men who are not going to want to give up on this, on marrying a Gentile woman. And the Torah is doing two things here. The commandments are twofold here. One is to give this woman the respect and the space so she can mourn. Okay. And the next is to reveal to the man that she's not so attractive. Look. And after living with her, with crying and mourning and so on, she's going to become less attractive to him. Also, it gives her time to adjust to her new environment. Now, this might sound really horrible by today's standards, unless you're the Taliban, which nobody hears the Taliban. Excuse me. But back then, this was incredibly compassionate behavior, because women were considered part of the booty of war, like women, cattle, gold, silver. I mean, that's how women were considered to be and treated, not in the Torah, not a Gentile woman, not a Jewish woman. There had to be respect for the personhood of the woman. Okay, going to continue. All right. So anyway, the other thing is that this woman had to convert. She had to convert to Judaism. And this period of time enabled her to get accustomed to Torah values. She had the opportunity to prepare herself for gerus, for conversion. Okay. And this idea is that she has to be willing to become a convert who keeps all the mitzvahs. Okay. If she doesn't want to, the Jew may wait for her, Jewish soldier may wait for her, but after a certain period of time, he's forbidden from marrying her if she doesn't want to convert. Okay, so there was a whole lengthy process here. Now, this idea, okay, this idea of the captive woman is something that has ramifications for the rest of the parsha. If you remember, I mentioned in the beginning that one mitzvah follows along another in this parsha. One commandment follows along another. And I'm going to explain. What occurs after that are the laws of, okay, after this section, occurs the laws of the firstborn son. And it begins with the man has two wives, one hated and one beloved. Okay. And if the firstborn son is the son of the hated wife, he's not allowed, the man, the soldier, the Jew is not allowed to give the firstborn son of the beloved wife precedence over the firstborn son of the wife that he doesn't love as much. Okay, that's number one. The next laws that follow are the laws of the wayward son. What happens if you have a wayward son? And the Torah goes into the laws. Okay, how a boy must be cautioned, how he may have to go to the rabbis and have the rabbis speak to him, and so on. But the idea is this all follows from not marrying the appropriate wife. It all follows from giving in to one's desires in this area of marriage, not marrying someone for reasons of their virtue. Okay, so we have to understand from this, okay, there's so many layers to this, that the actual frequency of Jewish men marrying captive women was not all that prevalent. It really wasn't. Okay, now the next thing in the Midrash that gives us insight into this whole parsha, into this whole portion of the parsha, with this idea of the captive woman, is the story of David HaMelech, King David, and Batsheva. Okay, so what happened? So Uriah, okay, or Uriah, I think in English, Uriah was a general going out to battle, and he was married to Batsheva. And in those times, before a man went out to battle, there was a concept of divorcing your wife so she wouldn't be left an aguna, a woman who didn't know if her husband was alive or dead. and she couldn't marry again. So this was a practice that some people did. King David wanted to marry Batsheva, and on the simple level, this is called a sin. However, the Midrash and the Talmud and everybody tells us, don't say this is really a sin, okay? Because there are many layers of meaning to it. But on the simple level, King David took Batsheva as his wife, while Uriah, his general, was sent out to army. So what happened? So the Midrash tells us there was a consequence to this, a spiritual consequence. And the consequence was as followed, okay? Batsheva was a Jewish woman, not a captive woman in war, but the Midrash still illustrates with this. What happened is David married Ma'acha, who was a Gentile princess who was a captive in war. And he married her according to the laws that I just described, the laws of the captive woman of war. And it says the prophets, that when a Jew marries a woman like this, she's likely to give birth to a rebellious son, because she converted under some slight duress. Even if she wanted to become a Jew, there was still duress there. She was captured, she was traumatized. And therefore, her son is likely to be a wayward son, a rebellious son. And also, the other reason is because a husband of this woman, his motives weren't really l'shem shamayim. They weren't really for the sake of heaven. We should marry for the sake of heaven. We should marry to show love to a partner, to learn and grow together with a partner, to bring children in the world, to make a Jewish Torah home. That's marriage. However, when you know you're capturing a woman and you desire her beauty, there's always this question of what kind of marriage it is. Therefore, because a child is a product of the parents' thoughts and loves and feelings and spirituality, and by the way, not always so apparent, but that's the deeper understanding. Therefore, a wayward son, rebellious son would be born. And we know that the son of King David and Ma'acha was Avshalom, one of the most rebellious sons in the Torah. And the story of Avshalom, you can look it up if it's not familiar to you. It's also in Tehillim, in Psalms. David bemoans the anguish at having a son like this, who really is his enemy. Very, very heartbreaking story. Okay. So even King David, who we know didn't really sin, and who really, it wasn't the exact case of a captive woman, still the Midrash illustrates the outcome with a story of him and Avshalom. Okay. So anyway, that's the laws of the captive woman. And it's a very, in today's world, it's very hard to really understand this, especially as women. It's an uncomfortable idea that a man could have had 2 wives back then, and a king, as we discussed last week, was allowed to have 18. It's a very uncomfortable idea, but we have to understand that there was not only spiritual differences in the past, obviously, there were more tzaddikim back then and so on, but there were many cultural differences as well. And so we just have to take it at a certain face value. Okay. There are many more laws that follow in this part. There's obviously, we're not going to go over 74 of the commandments. I'm choosing some that I think are of interest. So there are more laws, and all these laws are about really boundaries. As a matter of fact, this whole parsha is so much about healthy boundaries and not mixing things together that don't belong mixed together. And that's why it begins with a captive woman. So the next law we're going to discuss is the law of women wearing men's clothes and men wearing women's clothes. Okay. And it says in the Torah, it uses very, very strong language about how disgusting and repulsive and horrible this concept is. Now, it's not just talking about, you know, we can get the idea that maybe sexual deviancy and all these kinds of things are involved, but even there's questions whether even on Purim, should a man dress as a woman and a woman dress as a man? Many people hold not, even for the sake of the mitzvah of Purim, which is to turn everything upside down and inside out. There is such a strong idea that this is not something that's acceptable. So why? So Rebbe Nachman gives us some beautiful, beautiful, deep spiritual reasons why. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few of them. So Reb Noson, who explicates Rebbe Nachman's teaching, says like this: a man represents Torah, and a woman represents prayer. So a woman who asks for and requests, she's this concept. A woman is this concept of receptivity and requesting. That's what the spiritual concept of female is. She must ask for Hashem's help when it comes to prayer. But when it comes to Torah, and by Torah, Reb Noson is referring to learning Torah, one must act with gevura, with strength. And that gives us a hint to this idea of learning Torah with strength. Gevura is related to this word gever, which means man or mister. And a person should understand that when it comes to prayer, one should be yielding and requesting and soft. And when it comes to learning Torah, one should be actually not demanding per se, but he shouldn't be too humble. Be a little pushy. Okay. When you want knowledge, be a little pushy. When you want help from Hashem, yield. Be gentle. Don't demand. We have a custom that's almost universal in Judaism. It's to not demand things from Hashem. Some people say otherwise, but it's really not that accepted. We don't demand. We yield. We open up. We tell Hashem we want to receive. Okay. So Reb Noson is giving us insight into how these two things shouldn't be mixed up. We shouldn't demand and be pushy in prayer, and we shouldn't be yield and softly when it comes to Torah. We should, by Torah, he means Torah learning. We should want to learn. We should push. And who should we push? We should push ourselves. If we really want to learn, we'll make time for it every day. Even a woman will make time for it every day. Okay, why am I saying even a woman? Because the mitzvah of Torah learning isn't incumbent upon a woman in the same way as it is a man. Okay, but we have to tap into our inner gevura, our inner strength to learn. For women, it is more difficult. Why? Not because we aren't as intelligent or aren't as intellectual or bright. That's not the reason. It's because women are used to, especially after they're done with schooling, are used to multitasking. And we're used to doing many things at once. Okay, probably many of you are folding laundry while you're listening to this, and or driving somewhere or so on. And a man is more likely to focus, and therefore he's built for more focused, in-depth study. And by the way, this isn't the case with everyone. Obviously, there are differences. Okay, there's some women who are much more focused than some men. It happens, and it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We're all built different. Hashem gives each of us different gifts. Next, also from Reb Noson, men. Okay, remember, these are Kabbalistic concepts. These aren't just decided by Rebbe Nachman and Reb Noson. This is Kabbalah. Men represent truth and understanding. Okay, this idea that there's truth. What is truth? It's very often black and white. This is one truth, and we have to understand it. A woman represents amuna, faith, and the ability to know when there's a limit. We're getting something beautiful here. So a man is more black and white, technically, Kabbalistically, technically speaking. And a woman represents this idea of, I don't always need to know, but I have faith. And I know if I don't know that, it's okay. I don't have to know that in order to have faith. We see that these things sound diametrically opposed, but they're not, because what the meaning is here is to not change from a garment of truth into a garment of falsehood or false faith, which is idolatry. So when a man wears a woman's clothing, he's switching this concept of truth to one that only requires this concept of faith, which leads to falsehood. I'll explain. And when a woman wears a man's garment, she's taking this black and white truth and mixing it up with this ability to have faith in something. So let me try to explain this. We have to have knowledge, men and women. We all have to have knowledge. We all have to have a level of we know what the truth is. We must know this intellectual. It doesn't have to just be in our hearts. It's not just about feelings. We have to have some kind of, we can study this, we can know that, we can learn this in Torah and that. This day is Hanukkah, that day is Shabbat. This day, this is, bacon's unkosher and apples are kosher, whatever it is. We have to know this. Yet we also have to know that there's a point at which our knowledge and our wisdom and our learning stops. For each person, that's a different point. And that's where our amuna, our faith, begins. And if we mix up these concepts, we're going to have faith in falsehood and knowledge of what we can only call in this context idolatry. It's another reason why men and women don't trade clothing. Okay. Now, I know these concepts are very deep, but they're so beautiful and they're so important. I really want to share them with you. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you one more, I think, which is, okay. So this on the same topic that man represents truth and woman represents faith. Okay. Prior to eating from the Eis Hadas, the tree of knowledge, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, didn't wear clothing. What does this signify? They didn't need clothing, excuse me. Okay. It signifies that truth and faith, it signifies that, that the truth of Hashem was easy to understand. It was everywhere. They didn't need clothing. They didn't need to hide anything. Okay. After eating from the tree, what happened? Now, because there was different kinds of knowledge, okay, now the Sitra Achra, the other side, the evil side, was able to take both truth, emes, and faith, emuna, and use them to fool us. So what do I mean by that? What does that mean exactly? So if you go, I don't have it in front of me and it just popped into my mind now, and then I'll go back to what I planned to say. But if you go to Rebbe Nachman's advice book, published in English by the Breslov Research Institute, I highly recommend, if you don't have it, you get a copy. You will see that his first chapter is emes ve'emuna, truth and faith, because these two things are complementary. Okay, we must have knowledge of truth and faith in the things that go beyond our knowledge. But many world religions fool with this. This is a way to fool people, okay? And many philosophies of the world fool with this. And so I won't go too much. I don't really want to go into politics, but what I will say is, hold on one second. I see I have a direct message here, which I didn't see before. Okay. Okay. So one of the things is it's so quite amazing is that you will look today, and I think everybody can say in American politics, we see this idea of feelings. This is a cultural movement of feelings and faith and belief taking the place of law and order and healthy boundaries. Okay. In other words, this idea of the mixing up of truth and faith, they're not in their right place. When it comes to the economy, we need to go as, like, not we, you and I personally, but politicians and people who are responsible for the free fall our economy's in. Again, I hope you don't mind me referring to what's going on in current events, but it's very relevant. This idea is that we see this free fall, and we understand that comes from, and it doesn't take major investigation to see that this is coming from policies that are taking, okay, feel good ideas and stomping on actual facts and numbers and statistics, the real stuff. Okay, this feels good, so we'll do this. This seems like it's moral, so we'll do that. Okay, so we see this mixing up in the world at large. Again, like just in the beginning of this discussion, when we see things mixing up in the world at large, when we see calamities happening, whether they are man-made, like the inflation and this terrible thing with the Taliban, or whether they are natural, like the horrible, just heartbreaking earthquake in Haiti. Okay, I think it's something like 1,500 people died. It's awful. Whatever it is, it's a message to us, and we can tune into it. And the more we learn Torah, the more we have the truth of Torah, and the more we have Amunah, the faith in Hashem, what we begin to find happening is we're able to see everything that's going on in the world through the lens of Torah. And which is why it's so interesting, which is why if you go to, let's say you go to one of the Gedolim, one of the great rabbis, or tzaddikim in Israel, and you ask them for advice about, let's say, your business, okay? And this may be a gadol who's never read a business book in his life, has never in his life read a Wall Street Journal, knows nothing about business except what's written in the Talmud. He can advise you. He can advise you because he has that beautiful and correct proportionate combination of Torah knowledge, truth, and Amunah, faith. Okay. Is this clear? I hope this is clear. All right. So Rashi explains, okay, we should always try to visit Rashi when we talk about the parsha, that exchanging men's and women's clothing on the absolute most pshat level leads to what? It leads to immorality. Okay. This exchange of clothing leads to the breakdown of society. Okay. And, you know, I remember being a little girl, and I remember seeing the comedian Milton Berle dress like a woman. And I remember, maybe I was exceptionally sensitive, I don't know, but I remember before the whole world invaded my head, I mean, it was really a little girl, like a few years old. I remember finding it very disconcerting and disturbing. That's how we're supposed to feel. We're not supposed to be able to shrug this stuff off. We're not supposed to be saying, okay, live and let live. Okay, this doesn't disturb me. This is political correctness. And again, I'm not talking about politics here. I'm commenting on what's going on in the world in direct relation to this parsha. Okay, we should be uncomfortable. We should say this isn't good for people in general, not just Jewish people, society as a whole. People have to know who they really are. Okay, today we see so much confusion, so much mix up. This is the last gasp of Mashiach. When you see black is white, man is woman, night is day. When you see these mix-ups, it's like one long Purim. Okay, we know how holy Purim is. Purim is so holy that Yom HaKippur is compared to Purim. Yom Kippur means the day like Purim. Ki is like, okay? In other words, Purim is the basis for comparison, and Purim is upside down, inside out. So what we understand is that all this mix-up is coming to a head. And please Hashem, we should see very soon very good things coming from this mix-up, from this intensity. We should, okay, we're going to be scared, we're going to be confused, we're going to look at the world with shock and awe, but at the same time, we're going to hang on with our faith, which is more natural to women. Okay, it's not just a Kabbalistic concept. Women more easily have a emunah. We have more fear too, but we're more capable of emunah. And when we do, and we strengthen our emunah, our faith, and we strengthen our bitachon, our trust in Hashem, then we get through this with a minimum of fear, hopefully, and a maximum of hope for the future. So we can look at all this insanity in the world, and we can say to ourselves, wow, everything is so insane in this world. And, the collapse of civilization, and oh no, and what are we going to do? And or we can look at it and say, oh, this is a sign. This is a sign before Mashiach comes, before worldwide redemption, and before everything is going to be good. And all this bad stuff has to come to the top. It's like a pot boiling with sediment in it. That's not my description. It's Rebbe Nachman's. A pot is boiling with sediment in it. And when you boil it, the sediment just comes up. Okay. If you've ever boiled chicken broth and all that scum rises to the surface, that's what's going on. Okay, all the stuff that needs to come out in the light and be corrected. Okay, and we shouldn't be shy about it, but we should also know when to speak up and when not. All right. Okay, the other idea of this is I mentioned the beginning of this concept of men and women's clothing, is this idea of, excuse me, my throat's going, this idea of knowing what's beyond the correct boundaries. Each person has a boundary. It's the opposite of the American cowboy philosophy, which is just go and choose and make a life for yourself, be independent. And, there's a certain extent with Rebbe Nachman that, yes, we shouldn't care what people think. And yes, and not especially in our service of Hashem. At the same time, we have to understand that we do have limitations. We do have boundaries. There's this whole trend towards teaching kids, and this has been going on a long time. It's been going on for a few decades already. You can do anything. You can be anything. But honestly, that's just not true. Okay. If you teach a child with tremendous musical ability and no athletic ability, they can be anything, and they want to be an Olympic diver, there's going to be a problem. Okay. No, we have to know who we are. And then within that knowledge, within that, we can do anything if we have the will, the motivation. Okay. So it requires some self-knowledge. Now, I really want to be able to get to Shatnez today and the mixtures of seeds. Excuse me. Just not, I'm not myself. Okay, so the Shatnez follows from this commandment to not plant a vineyard with mixed seeds, okay? Or else the yield, the produce will be forbidden, not just the seeds, but the grapes themselves. Okay, why? So it's a continuation of this idea. This idea is kilayim, which are forbidden mixtures. And there's also laws about hybrids in I can't think of the word, I don't know why, agronomy, okay, agriculture. There's laws. We're not allowed to make hybrids out of things. It's interesting. Grafting, there's always a question with grafting and grafted fruits and so on. So Reb Noson explains that each type of seed draws down Hashem's blessing from its own source. And when planted separately and appropriately, okay, the blessings are coming down from the appropriate place in the appropriate quantity. Mixing seeds can bring down a confusion and an overabundance of blessing. And one's going to receive one and one's going to receive another. Is that really how it works? Actually, yes. We are taught that every single plant, bar one, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, has a malach assigned to it, an angel. In this case, the angel is not only a messenger, but it's more like a conduit of Hashem's life force, the life force he's giving to each particular plant and seed and so on. Okay, and it's specific per plant. There's an angel for grass. There's an angel for blueberries. There's an angel for grapes. Okay, and when we think of an angel, you know, with the wings and everything, that's not necessarily what's going on here. It's an angel is a bundle of specific spiritual energy with a specific spiritual purpose and a specific way of cognition. Okay. And an angel has a job, an angel has a mission. And generally speaking, an angel is created with one mission. Okay. So there's the angel of blueberries is going to be pushing down that sustenance and life force into the blueberries that the blueberry needs, okay, to be a blueberry. So what happens is, and I do want to mention wheat, they say that wheat doesn't have an angel. It is directly grows from Hashem. It doesn't need anything to bring down its special sustenance, which is why bread is so holy. And this also may be why the tree that Adam and Chava ate from, there's debate about which fruit it was. Some opinions say it's wheat. Wheat has its own special relegation. And it's interesting because we have this custom to be very careful with bread. Okay. So sometimes you have to throw food out because it's bad. But with bread, we're supposed to be very careful. We're supposed to even eat the crumbs. And obviously, if it's gone moldy or it's beyond whatever, you shouldn't eat it. But the idea is to not let it get to that point. So you will see people who are otherwise very relaxed about food taking off the crumbs from the challah table and maybe even using them, eating them right away. People do that because it's supposed to be a segula to rectify poverty, or they'll maybe freeze them and use them in something. People are very careful about this. And also, actually, there are people who right before Passover, if you have bread in the house and you can't get rid of it, they don't want to burn it, they will let it go stale and then dispose of it, to let it lose its freshness, even though they don't like to do that, okay? Because they don't want to waste bread because it's made from wheat. It's a special food. Okay, so meanwhile, these forbidden mixtures, the parsha says that we can't do is these mixtures of different kinds of seeds. Specifically here, it says a vineyard, and it also continues on with a mixture. Don't plow an ox and a donkey together. Why? So the idea is that it's cruel to the ox, the donkey doesn't want to graze, and the ox does want to graze, and they're pulling at each other. That's the pshat. But also, ritually pure animals like the ox represent good thoughts. And impure animals, here we are back to this Kabbalistic, spiritual, mystical reasons, represent bad thoughts. Okay. And one can't go through life with both these thoughts mixed up and mixed together. Okay. All right. So that's just an illustration. There's a lot more. Now, we're also going to get to Shatnez. Shatnez is this combination of semer, which is wool, and pishtim or pishtan in the if you just look it up in the dictionary, which is flax or linen. Okay. And this pishtim, this linen, okay, the wool, semer, represents chesed, kindness. And pishtim represents gevuras, harsh judgments. Okay. Gevura means judgment, but here the implication is harsh. And these should never be mixed together because, why? Because they can't be mixed together. However, in certain cases, a human being has the ability to mix together chesed and gevura. What's the case? So in terms of Shatnez, when it comes to tzitzis, okay, it can be a mixture of wool and linen. It's the only thing. And that represents this higher order of this mixture of harshness, of goodness and kindness and loving kindness, and harshness and judgments. But otherwise, ordinary people in regular clothing don't wear Shatnez. So what do you do about Shatnez? Okay, there's so much interesting things here. What do you do about Shatnez? So this mixture of wool and linen. So if you have a wool garment, it's very possible, especially with coats or anything with a lining or a facing, that is made out of linen, and you need to get it checked. This is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah just like kashrus and Shabbat. Okay. And certain shoes, okay. I think there was a period where Uggs maybe had Shatnez in them. I don't know that they do anymore. Okay, because but the Uggs were wool, with sheep wool, with the interface, the lining and the sole was linen. So what do? You get it checked. So how do you get it checked? So about a block and a half away from me is a Shatnez laboratory. And if I ever buy anything wool, or I buy anything that's a mixed blend of fabrics, I'm not sure, I take it over there. Okay, a hat, okay, a scarf, maybe even with a label. Maybe the label is linen. Okay, I take it over there. They check it. They have a special microscope. They know what all the different fibers look like, and they'll let me know whether there's Shatnez in it. So I personally haven't found Shatnez in anything. My husband has, and I've even used the laboratory. I was making these little dolls out of felt, like I was doing felting at one point, making these little dolls out of felt, and just for fun. And I went and I wanted to make sure that the wool that I was buying, because I couldn't buy it around here, so I had to order it from Amazon. I wanted to make sure it was really sheep's wool and that I was getting the real deal, because real wool acts better. And so I took it over there and they just checked it for me, and he paid them a very small fee, and they were like, yes, it's sheep's wool. So if you have clothing and you want to get it checked, there's also places you can mail it into. If anybody's interested, I'll find out for you how to mail it in. I know you're able to mail it in. That's what Chabad shluchim, who live all over the world, do. They mail in their clothing when they get a new clothing with those items, or else they wear synthetic, or they're sure cotton, or they're sure there's nothing in it. Okay, so Shatnez represents a very, very confused state. Wool is a loftier idea in terms of another Kabbalistic interpretation. And linen represents a lower level. Now, what's so interesting is Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, brought their offerings to Hashem. Cain brought flax, okay, and Abel brought sheep's wool. Okay, so this is very interesting. We get a better understanding of Cain and Abel from this concept, because you think Cain brought flax, he brought linen, he brought vegetable matter. It's nothing was killed and it was given to Hashem, and yet Abel's offering was the one beloved by God, and it was a sheep. Okay, so it gives us sort of an insight into why the sheep represents something spiritually higher. This concept, not the sheep, the wool represents something spiritually higher. So anyway, I would like to encourage you, before we go, I would like to encourage you to take a look at this week's parsha. And if you're somebody who reads the parsha or reads an aliyah a day, great. But if you're not, I really want to encourage you to read it. I know that it's online at Aish, it's online at Sefaria, it's online at Chabad, if you don't have it, or if you want it with commentary, and to really look through the mitzvot, the commandments in this parsha, you might be very amazed. There's another one I wanted to get to. We won't have time today, Shloach HaKhan, which is the removing the mother bird and taking the egg from the nest. It's just fascinating, and really, it really shows you that we do the mitzvot not because they make sense to us, because a lot of these just don't really make sense. Even with these Kabbalistic explanations, do they really make sense? We do the mitzvot because they're in the Torah, and because that's the way that Hashem has given us to connect to him. And little by little, we learn and we take these things in and we make them part of our consciousness. We talk to Hashem about it, we talk to other people about it, and we change for the better. We find ourselves incorporating these ideas, this idea of not mixing boundaries in life, not mixing things that shouldn't be mixed. Sometimes things should be mixed, okay? So I want to end with one, I hope you'll forgive me, popular concept. This is the concept of diversity. Why am I speaking about diversity? Because it's actually very relevant to this parsha. Today, what the general society has is this absolute bullhorn screaming diversity, diversity, diversity. Is this an incorrect mixture? No, it's not. There's nothing wrong with diversity. People need to hear each other's point of views. However, this is that fake mixture that I was talking about when it came to changing garments, because they're not really calling for diversity. All they're doing is calling for diversity of externals, okay? And once we understand this idea of truth and faith, and this idea how truth, okay, this idea of the male concept, the Kabbalistic concept of the male, okay, is truth, and the Kabbalistic concept of female is faith, and we see that this idea is mixed up, you end up with faith in nothing. Because this faith and this concept of externals is faith in nothing. It's a muna in bubbles. It's a muna in vapor. There's nothing there with diversity of the way somebody looks or the way their skin is or whatever. That's not diversity. In Judaism, what is diversity is this is what considered diversity, is when a Jew who believes in Hashem, believes in Hashem's Torah, finds a path that is slightly different, or a different approach, or a different point of view, but still believes in Hashem and his Torah, and it works for them. But you have a different path, still believe in Hashem, still believes in his Torah, but it works for you. And they may be different. They may be at times opposed, but they're both authentic and genuine. That is Jewish diversity. That is the kind of diversity that we have to accept and embrace. And that kind of diversity leads to true unity, because when we embrace the truth, then we can have slightly different approaches to it, and it's okay. All right. So I'm done for the day because I'm losing my voice. I seem to have some kind of cold, whatever. And I want to thank again Dr. Eleanor Gudis for sponsoring this this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Okay, everyone.